Hi everyone, welcome to another NHD topic tip. This time we're going to be focusing on the question of, can I select a world history topic for my NHD project? And of course, the answer is yes. NHD does not restrict any historical topic based on geographical location or time period. We want you to find a topic that interests you so that you have fun while doing your research. That being said, always check with your teacher first before you select a topic. They may have certain parameters or rules for the classroom, and they may want you to focus on a specific time period or geographical location based on what you're learning in the classroom. So always check with your teacher first. But if your teacher is okay with you doing a world history topic, there are a lot of options to choose from. So you might be interested in topics in Africa, Asia, the Middle East, Latin America, Australia, New Zealand. Any of these places are encompassed under that umbrella of the term world history. So there's just a couple of things to consider before you start doing your project on a world history topic. Keep in mind, if you're doing a project on Asia, and that means Korea, Japan, China, South Asia, including India and other countries, or if you're doing a topic on Africa or the Middle East, the documents are going to be written in those native languages. So if you can't speak Arabic or Bantu or Hindu, right, maybe this isn't the topic for you. And that's okay. There are other ways to get around that. For one, a lot of sources have been translated. So you have translations that you can use in order to help you understand what those documents say in their native language, but in English, right? Keep in mind though, those count as secondary sources, not primary sources, because they've been translated. You can find more in your NHD rulebook at nhd.org/rules. Now, the other thing to consider is that there is a way to kind of cross that gap. If you're looking at Australia or New Zealand, both of those areas speak English, so that might be a way to get around the issue of the language barrier. Another thing to consider is to do a project that relates back to the US. So that way you can balance out what you can't figure out from those with English-based sources. So where should you start? We have to head straight to your libraries, your archives, and your historical societies to find more. So I know this sounds counterintuitive, but the first place you want to start is by exploring what's available in the United States. Now, I know you're talking about a world history topic, and it seems counterintuitive to start with US archives, but that's actually not the case. So a lot of universities and archives have overseas collections, and the reason for that being is historians and other scholars in the United States research these topics too. And so universities gain access to different archives and collections so that historians and other scholars can do their research. So you can see what they also have available in university archives, or maybe in bigger archives like the Library of Congress or the National Archives. So we're actually going to focus on the Library of Congress and the National Archives first, and we're going to take a little trip over to the Library of Congress so I can kind of give you some tips on how you might be able to use US-based archives to start doing some research on your NHD project that relates to world history. All right, so if we head over to catalog.archives.gov, which is the catalog for the United States National Archives, we can tap in to see what they have. Now again, remember I said one of the ways is to think about topics that not only relate to world history, but relate to United States history. So if we're using something like the National Archives, we might focus on something like the Korean War and search what they have available. So here we can see we have a whole Korean War collection. We also have Korean War files, and we have casualty rosters. We have records relating to enemy prisoners of war. We even have different notes from presidents and other materials housed at the National Archives that can help us start our research into the Korean War. Now, it's going to give us a US perspective, and that's okay. But in a lot of cases, the US is responding to what it sees in Korea. So we have one perspective of a much more global story. And our next thing is to figure out who is the US talking to over in South Korea or in North Korea? So if we head over to the Library of Congress at loc.gov and we go down to the section called Digital Collections, we can see everything that the Library of Congress has digitized. And if we use that refine your search option on the left-hand side, we can see what types of materials that the Library of Congress has digitized for us to review. Now, if we scroll down to part of, we can see that pieces of the Asia division at the Library of Congress, there is an Asia reading room there, have been digitized for us to review. So we might click on that and see that there is a Chinese rare book digital collection. There's also a Japanese censorship collection, which looks at different censored monographs and proofs from the 1920s and 1930s. So if you're interested in the topic of censorship in Japan, this might be a really great place to start. And you'll get the added benefit of having some notes about the materials that you're looking at from the Library of Congress. Another really great place to look is in different university archives. So you might check out Columbia University and their archive that relates to African history. You might check out Duke University's East Asia Digital Archive. You also might check out Brown, who has a large digital archive relating to Latin America and to East Asia. So we're actually going to take a field trip over to a couple of these so I can kind of show you how you might utilize these university archives to help you start to do your research. So as I mentioned, Columbia University has an African Studies catalog and archive. And what university archives do is they highlight the numerous archives that they have access to, both in the United States and abroad. So you're going to get to see what they do have access to. Now keep in mind, some options are behind the university firewall and you won't be able to access them unless you can go to the campus and talk with the librarians over at the libraries and see if you can get access for the day. And that might be possible at a lot of universities, and you should always check with your local universities to see if this is an option, and you can get access by traveling to those libraries. Now, some stuff is available online, and you can see that these are all listed out for you. And so one option is to take a look and see what they have. So one option that you can do is when you're browsing through, you might notice something that interests you, like apartheid history, which is very prevalent in African history. So you might check out what's available. And here, Columbia links to materials done by the University of Oxford in England and gives you discussions of different groups and people who were involved in the British anti-apartheid movement. So this might be something to take a look at, and you can see kind of the history, the boycott movement through the kind of 60s and 70s. You can take a look at who was involved, but you can also take a look at some of the interviews given by people who were a part of the movement. So this is one really great way to utilize US-based archives to find what you need overseas if you're not really sure where to start looking. Okay, now that I've given you some options, we can also turn our attention to what is available in overseas archives. And that means starting to look through places like the British Library and the British Museum. It means taking a look at what's out there that's been developed by universities and other organizations. So, say you're interested in doing something on the topic of Latin America or the Age of Revolutions. One place that you might think to start is actually the Age of Revolutions, which is its own site that has compiled a bunch of different information and unites a series of universities and museums across Europe and other places to give you a complete discussion of this Age of Revolutions. So we're going to actually take a quick field trip over there so I can show you what I mean. So if you go over to ageofrevolution.org, you will get the Age of Revolution database that has been compiled. And this is full of both primary and secondary sources that can help you if you're doing a project on the history of Latin America or on Haiti and the Caribbean. So it gives you different options of where you can start, including the collection, exploring by themes. It even gives you a timeline that's going to help you understand that larger discussion of the Age of Revolution. There's also a collection that has a series of objects that have been pulled from museums and galleries not only across the UK, but abroad. And these will give you different objects that relate to that larger discussion of the Age of Revolutions. And it might be objects such as boots or plaques, or it might be paintings or political pieces that will help you understand what exactly is going on in this Age of Revolution. Don't discount European archives. And the reason for that being is Europe was heavily involved in colonization, and not just colonization in places like North America that we know about, but in places like Africa and Asia, Australia, and New Zealand. And that means that they've collected a lot of materials, not only relating to European history, but relating to the history of those countries. So don't discount them because you're doing a topic on the Middle East or Asia or Africa, right? The British, the French, the Germans, they're going to collect all of that information that they have, especially because they're spending time there as they're colonizing. Just keep in mind that a lot of their material is going to come from that European perspective. It's not always going to give you the perspective of those who are being colonized. So one place you always want to start is the British Library. The British Library houses a large number of manuscripts and other collections that relate to world history topics. So for instance, the British Library has a manuscript collection relating to Africa, especially focusing on the countries that the British colonized while there. So it might look at Ethiopia and other areas of Northern Africa. And some of these manuscripts have been digitized, so you can head over to the British Library and check those out. You'll also want to check out the British National Archives, not to be confused with the US National Archives. The British National Archives can be found at nationalarchives.gov.uk, and they actually have an online exhibition called Africa Through the Lens, which looks at different photographs of African history from the 1860s onward. So it's going to give you a little bit of that different perspective, while also showing you the history of Africa as seen through that British lens. I also mentioned that university archives are really important, and that doesn't mean just US colleges and university archives. Europeans have their own university system, and they have their own collections and archives that house a lot of really great materials that you can mine to help you find primary sources that'll help you on your NHD topic. If you're doing a project on the Middle East, you might check out the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. They actually have an entire collection related to Oriental manuscripts. So this will basically look at Arabic and Persian manuscripts, and some of them have been digitized so that you can view them. Now keep in mind, these manuscripts are going to be written in Arabic. So if you don't speak Arabic, they might be a little difficult to understand. But it'll help you see the type of materials produced in places like Persia and other areas of the Middle East that might help you if you're doing a project on those topics. Also, don't forget to check out nhd.org/partners-resources. NHD does have a lot of partners who are US based, but we've started to grow to make sure that we can include European and world history options for our students and teachers interested in those topics. If you head on over to Partner Resources page and you scroll down, you'll notice that we've started to incorporate places like New Zealand. The National Library of New Zealand compiled a series of different links and archives that will help students who are interested in the history of New Zealand get started on their topics. So we're actually going to use Digital NZ to start doing some research into a topic. So in this case, say we're interested in looking into the history of the temperance movement in New Zealand. Now, most of you know or might learn about the temperance movement in the United States later on in one of your classes. The United States had a major prohibition movement and the push for temperance, right? Or that banning the sale of alcohol in the United States. It might be interesting to note that we are not the only country to have that debate and to push for the prohibition of alcohol sales. So if you're interested in this topic, it might be interesting to flip that narrative on its head and think about it and how it played out in a different country. Now, here in the United States, we actually get the Volstead Act in the 1920s, and we see prohibition go into effect. However, the United States is one of the only places where it's really that successful. And it's not really that successful even in the United States because it only lasts about a decade. And then we repeal that Volstead Act that becomes the 18th Amendment with the 21st Amendment. So it doesn't stick around long in the US Constitution as an amendment, but in other places, it doesn't even get that far. So let's head over and check out and see what sources we can find relating to the temperance movement that happens in New Zealand. So we're going to head over to digitalnz.org. This allows you to search through numerous different collection items across collections in one place that is housed in New Zealand archives. So we're going to enter into that search box, temperance. Digital NZ allows you to pull across libraries, archives, and other databases. So you'll note that they come from different places. This just houses them in one specific place for you to look. So here we're going to see everything that we can find across Digital NZ and what they have relating to the temperance movement. So we'll note that there is a Temperance Society poster that calls for a public meeting about the Temperance Society and the possible prohibition that might ensue. We'll also note that there are pledge cards, right? People who are going to pledge not to do this. So that's just one version of it, but we might find other materials such as this particular pledge card, right? Same thing, but very different, and might be interesting to note what do these different pledge cards say and how they relate to the topic of temperance and prohibition in New Zealand. And of course, what's really great is you'll note that this one is from NZ History, which is part of the Ministry of Culture and Heritage in New Zealand. So it might also help that you can also link to those particular collections to see what they have as well. And that might include pictures of various locations related to temperance history or different cartoons relating to it. So always check out and see what's available across different platforms. So let's see what else we can find. We might find different materials that talk about other temperance meetings so we can see how widespread across New Zealand the temperance movement was. We might also see different pictures of notable figures that are involved in the discussion of temperance. So that'll give us a place to start in looking to see who's doing the talking when it comes to this topic. We'll also see different conventions and large groups, and we can understand from those large pictures who's involved in this particular movement. So this is just one way to start digging into what's available on different world history topics and start doing the research that you need to build out your NHD project relating to world history topics. Good luck with your NHD project.